I knew something was off the second Derek, our new VP with a jawline sharp enough to slice deli meat and the emotional depth of a wet napkin, walked into our Monday morning stand-up wearing a suit. Not his usual Patagonia vest. Not even a smug startup grind hoodie. A full damn suit. That's when the animal part of my brain kicked in. The part that knows when a storm's coming before you hear the thunder. I'd been with this company since it was 3 rented trailers and a generator held together with prayer and duct tape. I had survived 6 COOs for acquisitions, 2 sexual harassment settlements, and 1 CFO who tried to expense a yacht. But I would not survive Derek's need to look tough. He waited until everyone was in the room. Engineering, ops, legal, project managers, even a couple of poor interns who didn't know whether to take notes or cry. Then he turned toward me like he was teeing off on a par 3. "You know what's really been slowing us down?" he asked, not looking at anyone in particular, but the room was already leaning in like it was a middle school food fight about to break out. Compliance bottlenecks. Bureaucratic overreach. Paper pushers who think they're mission critical when all they really do is delay progress. I didn't blink. My coffee was still warm in my hand. He smiled at the silence like we were all supposed to start clapping. "That's why, effective immediately, we'll be streamlining. As of now, Marie's position has been dissolved." No one breathed. "I wish you all a great week. Let's get back to building something that matters." There it was. The clean corporate kill. No warning. No HR. Just public humiliation dressed in the language of efficiency. Now before I continue, quick thing. If this already has you clenching your jaw or whispering, "Oh hell no," do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people listen without subscribing, but it's the folks who do that keep these stories rolling. Okay, back to Derek's downfall. I didn't argue. Didn't cry. Didn't even stand up right away. I just sipped my coffee and nodded once. And I mean really nodded like a courtroom nod. The kind you give when you know something they don't. It was 8:44 a.m. I stood slowly, adjusted my blouse, and pulled my ID badge off its clip. On my way out, I passed Jenny from legal and quietly slipped her a sealed envelope. She blinked, confused. I didn't explain. Back at my desk, I placed a small navy binder on top of my keyboard. Locked. No label. No note. Just left it there like a fuse waiting for a match. People avoided eye contact like I'd started leaking radiation. Derek was already strutting into another meeting, probably planning his next streamlining. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. My hands didn't shake. My stomach didn't turn. What nobody in that room knew was that the permit renewal that kept our entire $10 million a day operation legally operational, the one I'd extended 3 times under my name, expired at 8:59 a.m. Not our company's name. Not Derek's. Mine. And once I was no longer employed, that extension became null and void. I hit the parking lot at 8:48. By the time I was pulling onto the highway, I could see state inspector SUVs merging off the ramp. God bless punctual government workers. Derek must have thought he won a damn Oscar. By 9:06 a.m., the company intranet had a banner that read, "A new ERA, speed over static." Below it, a quote from his smugness himself. "We're cutting red tape, eliminating drag, and empowering our people to build without barriers." Like we were some startup in a WeWork with kombucha on tap, not a state-regulated, high-liability industrial contractor with $50 million in state grants tied to operational compliance. He even posted a selfie. Him at the whiteboard, sleeves rolled up, a marker in one hand and my name wiped clean from the org chart in the corner. Caption: "Out with the old. Hashtag streamlined." Cute. By 9:15, project managers were already forwarding out new fast-track procedures. I saw one memo where they literally crossed out the compliance checklist and replaced it with, "Use discretion. Keep moving." Another note from Derek. "We trust our people. We don't need Mother May I anymore." Meanwhile, off-site, I was sipping bad diner coffee from a chipped mug with lipstick stains that weren't mine, watching from my phone as the house I built caught fire in slow motion. Because what Derek didn't understand, and clearly no one else had the clearance to grasp, was that our operations license wasn't some PDF filed in a drawer. It was a living agreement, certified through the state's integrated compliance oversight platform. And the renewal I'd filed last month? It wasn't just a nice to have. It was a provisional extension based on my credentials under my name, because our environmental review hadn't cleared yet. And it expired at 8:59 a.m. 60 seconds later, we were in violation. Not in theory. Not soon. Not if they find out. The clock struck, the extension dropped, and boom, we were officially out of bounds. So when the inspectors pulled up to Site 14 at 9:17, hard hats gleaming like Judgment Day halos, they weren't there for a chat. They had clipboards. They had questions. And the first one was simple. Can you provide your current compliance renewal? Derek wasn't there, of course. He was downtown playing Visionary in a glass conference room, probably doodling synergy on a whiteboard while they brewed his oat milk latte. The site lead panicked. Called legal. Legal called ops. Ops called back and said, "Didn't Marie handle that?" By 9:24 a.m., 5 different managers were scrambling through shared drives looking for a form that never existed, because I hadn't uploaded it. Because it wasn't theirs to upload. The only copy lived on the state's secure portal, tied to my ID, my login, my signature. And guess what happens when a named compliance officer is removed from payroll without a succession file or transition form? The system auto-flags the account as inactive pending audit. It doesn't just pause the license. It revokes it. Operations didn't know. Legal didn't check. HR never asked. The first domino didn't tip. It got yanked like a tablecloth from under a full Thanksgiving spread. And me? I just sat there in that booth, stirring powdered creamer into my coffee with the back of a butter knife, watching headlines refresh on my phone and thinking, tick tick motherfew. Well, you get the idea. At exactly 9:01 a.m., the state's regulatory database sent out the digital equivalent of a middle finger, a statewide stop work order for all operations tied to our company's active projects. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a polite nudge. It was a full-scale neon-lit shutdown notice. Red-bannered headers. Official seals. Time-stamped. Digitally certified. One button away from being posted to public records and investor feeds. Every crew chief's tablet went black on their active job logs. Dispatches halted. Remote vehicle engines were auto-disabled by the Integrated Fleet Compliance Protocol. Union reps started texting foremen demanding answers. By 9:04, Site 8 called in to report that state inspectors had physically blocked access to the southern perimeter, citing active investigation of permit invalidation. But Derek? Derek got the alert and laughed. Laughed. He stood there in his glass box office, surrounded by the same sycophants who had nodded through his Grand Maria's deadweight speech 24 hours earlier and said, "Must be a glitch. Someone call IT." IT. This smug little idiot thought the Department of Environmental Oversight ran on Google Calendar and Jira. The email subject line was crystal clear. Immediate suspension of activities. License authority lapsed. He forwarded it to legal with a one-line note. Sort this out. Probably Marie's mess. And for a few minutes that's what they tried to believe. That I'd missed a filing. That this was some clerical oopsie on my way out the door. Hell, maybe I even did it on purpose, sabotage, right? That's how they'd spin it. Until someone, probably Amber from risk mitigation, she was always 3 IQ points ahead of the room, finally clicked the attached audit log. That's when the first real silence hit. Because the log showed exactly what I knew it would. Account status. Revoked. Reason. Termination of credential holder. Holder name Marie Alden. Credential ID. Hashtag 41290P. Authority scope. Comprehensive permit authorization. Active sites. 12. Not the company's name. Not the VP's name. Not the legal team. Mine. They hadn't just fired someone who knew where the landmines were. They'd fired the person holding the remote detonator. By 10 a.m., the CFO had turned the color of raw tilapia. He'd just come out of a call with a procurement lead who calmly explained that with the active work stoppage, every contract was now considered in breach. Penalty clauses were being reviewed. One contract alone, a bridge project in Harris County, had a $700,000 a day overrun fee. Someone in finance tried to reassure him with, "We can explain the delay." "No," the CFO said, wiping his face with a legal pad. "We can't. Because our signature authority doesn't exist anymore." Back at the diner, I got a text from someone who hadn't spoken to me in 3 months. Did you see this? What is going on? I looked at it for a few seconds, then flipped the phone over and slid it across the booth like it was buzzing with radiation. Because here's the part Derek never asked about, never thought to ask. All those extensions? The ones he assumed just magically showed up on time? They didn't come from some clerical fairy in HR. They were tied to my certification, my credentials, my continuous training hours, my legal standing, my digital token. When they fired me, they didn't just cut a salary. They cut the power cord to the only person who kept them licensed to breathe. By 10:23 a.m., Derek was no longer laughing. Word around the office, and I mean fast, breathless Slack message kind of word, was that he'd flipped a chair in the executive huddle room. Not tossed it, flipped it. Like a teenager who just got grounded for crashing dad's car. His first instinct was textbook panic. Assign someone else. Said it like we were just playing musical chairs and he could plop any warm body into the compliance seat and call it a day. Problem was nobody could log in. Not legal. Not ops. Not even HR. The credential portal refused every access request with the same message. No authorized personnel on file. That's when people started really whispering. Because see, it turns out when you build something for over a decade, brick by brick, form by form, you don't just leave behind a job. You become the architecture itself. And when they kicked me out without protocol, they didn't just fire an employee. They triggered a systems-wide identity void. You can't reassign that like an Outlook calendar invite. By 10:31, HR finally pulled up my personnel file, hoping for, who knows, maybe a miracle succession form or a hidden password taped to the underside of my desk like some damn scavenger hunt. Instead, they found a trail of system flags. Dozens. All labeled with escalating priority. Pending critical escalation. Clearance renewal required. Warning. No designated alternate credential holder. Final alert. Regulatory transfer not initiated. The last one was timestamped Friday, 5:52 p.m. 3 days before Derek decided to swing his executive axe in front of a captive audience. And buried in my termination queue, the one legal had to review post-firing because apparently Derek skipped protocol there too, was an email. From me. Terse, clear, no fluff. Subject. Operational integrity notice. Per state protocol and regulatory continuity requirements, this process cannot be interrupted. Termination of credentialed agent without active transfer will result in immediate license invalidation. Please advise before proceeding further. No one advised. Back in the office, someone finally remembered the binder. I imagine the scene perfectly, in turn with trembling hands pulling it off my desk, carrying it like it might explode, cracking the clasp in the conference room while Derek paced like a hyena in a wind tunnel. Inside, printed flowcharts of active compliance dependencies. Credential token chain of custody requirements. A week-by-week roadmap of every pending filing, audit, and inspection scheduled for Q4. Each page labeled, contingent on named agent, Alden. The final page? A bright red sticky note that simply said, if you're reading this, it's already too late. They hadn't just ignored the guardrails. They'd torn them out at 80 miles an hour and were now wondering why the cliff came so fast. And me? I was back in my apartment by then, sitting on my worn-down balcony in an old hoodie, watching a pigeon eat my basil plant. No phone, no laptop, just air and the slow drip of my kitchen faucet echoing through the screen door. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not vengeance, just a steady, quiet power. Because I hadn't destroyed anything. I just let gravity do what it always does when arrogant men mistake foundations for fluff. The stop work order hit the regional business journals by lunchtime. Front page ticker. Bright red font. $10 day projects frozen over compliance failure. I imagine it came up mid-slide during the CEO's investor roadshow. Some sleek downtown hotel ballroom, a buffet of rubbery scrambled eggs and burnt coffee, and him halfway through a chart about exponential Q4 growth. His phone must have started vibrating like it was trying to escape his pocket. Legal. CFO. The board's private liaison. A state rep he hadn't spoken to since last year's regulatory gala. Now sending a blunt text. Call me. Now. He was on a flight back before dessert. By the time he stepped off the tarmac, face stone set behind his aviators, the entire office was locked in DEFCON 1. Derek met him in the executive lot with a manila folder and a face that had aged 6 years in 6 hours. Rumor says the first thing the CEO said wasn't even a hello, it was, "Who the hell did you fire?" He didn't wait for the answer. Stormed straight into the conference wing where legal had set up a war room. A wall of compliance reports. Printouts of the revoked license alert. Email logs. My binder, now dismantled page by page like it held the Zodiac cipher. That's where it all finally clicked for them. Because legal credit where it's due. Pieced it together faster than most. The credential ID tied to our operational license wasn't generic. Wasn't tied to the company. It was mine. They pulled the filings from the state's regulatory portal and saw my name on every signature block. Not just the permit renewals. Not just the inspection filings. Everything. Site authorizations. Environmental impact waivers. Union site conditions. Even the goddamn seasonal floodplain exemption for Site 3 that Derek had once called a waste of ink. Each one signed Marie Alden. Credentialed agent clearance level P4. Active since 2009. That's when the CEO asked the question that burned a hole in the carpet. Who had signature authority backup? Dead silence. No one did. I wasn't just the compliance officer. I was the legal firewall. The credentialed soul who gave the company its operational heartbeat. And when they fired me, with no transfer protocol, no successor paperwork, no 2-week overlap, they didn't just sever access. They revoked the very existence of their license. Everything else after that? Legal noise. Hair spin. Insurance negotiations. Doesn't matter. Without a credentialed agent on file, the state had one job. Shut it all down. And me? I was watching the live press stream on mute, feet up, microwaving day-old Chinese. Spicy lo mein extra sesame. Every few seconds, a new headline scrolled across the screen like a punchline with perfect comedic timing. CEO returns to crisis. Unnamed employee tied to operational halt. $300M in pending contracts on hold. Still no call. No apology. No email. No, we may have made a mistake. Just silence. The kind that feels like a wound trying not to bleed in public. But that was fine. Because buried in the system logs, tucked in the user permissions directory the IT team was now frantically decoding, was one last inconvenient fact. My credential didn't just authorize compliance. It authorized everything. And the moment HR terminated my account, the state system triggered a full revocation. Not pause. Not suspension. Revocation. Permanent until reapplication. Which requires 30 days, 3 signatures, and oh right, someone actually qualified. There's a saying in our world. You don't fire the license holder. You negotiate. But Derek didn't negotiate. He postured. And now the CEO was walking into a boardroom full of pissed-off investors, clutching a printout with my name on it, realizing they'd all let a middle manager burn the fuse on their foundation. The shutdown cascade started like a slow drip, then the pipe burst. By Tuesday morning, the company's general liability insurer sent a terse 4-sentence email. Subject: immediate review of coverage status. Due to the termination of your credentialed oversight agent and the resulting regulatory invalidation, we are initiating a policy audit. Pending review, your coverage remains suspended. Claims made during this period may be deemed non-payable. Translation: if something broke, burned, or blew up, the company was eating it. Entire. And it wasn't just construction insurance. It was the full stack: site liability, environmental incident coverage, even workers' comp. All of it depended on what the policy called verified chain of compliance. Without me, there was no chain. Just a broken link where Derek's ego used to be. By noon, union reps were breathing fire. Local 197 issued a stop notice for all affiliated crews. If their people weren't guaranteed legal operating conditions, and right now they weren't, then no one was picking up a wrench, hammer, or torch. One rep called it a preventative strike. Another, more bluntly, we don't get paid enough to get sued. The foreman had already seen it coming. Most crews just didn't show up that morning. Site supervisors were left standing in silence on million-dollar job sites that sounded more like cemeteries than progress. The only thing moving was the wind through orange fencing. At 3:17 p.m., the company intranet quietly removed Derek's profile from the executive page. No memo. No statement. Just gone. Like he'd never existed. Board suspension. Immediate. A few internal emails leaked, mostly from legal, suggesting that the situation was created by a fundamental misunderstanding of credential dependencies, which is corporate code for someone with power didn't know what the hell they were doing. I didn't smile. Not really. I just read the coverage screenshot someone forwarded me and took another bite of leftover pizza, cold, straight from the fridge, with a beer that had been sitting in my fridge door since the 4th of July. Then came the calls. First from Derek's old assistant. Just wondering if you'd be open to a chat with leadership, maybe clarify a few things? Then someone from legal. Off the record, of course, just to talk through some timelines. Then the COO scheduler. Strictly exploratory, no pressure. I didn't answer any of them. Just forwarded them to my attorney with a simple note. If they want to talk, they can go through the new channel. Because while they were busy unraveling, I'd already set the next phase in motion. As of Monday at 12:01 a.m., I wasn't former staff anymore. I was principal consultant, Alden Compliance Advisory LLC, fully registered, licensed, retained by 2 regional competitors before I'd even finished my paperwork. And yes, I made sure to certify myself under the same credential scope I'd once used to keep them afloat. My new rate? $120,000 per week. Flat. Non-negotiable. Includes 2 phone calls and 1 site visit. Additional hours billed separately. Funny thing about being undervalued, it makes you surgical about your worth when the leverage finally flips. And leverage, darling, had flipped so hard it cracked the floor. Thursday morning, 7:42 a.m., I got the email. No subject line. Just a blank white flag in digital form. Hi Marie, we'd like to discuss the possibility of reinstatement. We believe a path forward can be reached. Please advise availability. I read it twice, sipping my coffee with the calm of a woman who's already bought the burial plot and picked out the headstone. They waited 3 days. That's how long it took for their legal team. The same one that probably cheered Derek on when he decided to cut me loose in front of the whole damn office, to finally crawl back. Blinking into the light, realizing they hadn't just fired a compliance officer. They'd nuked their legal foundation. I didn't reply directly. Instead, I sent over a PDF my lawyer and I had drafted 2 weeks before I was ever let go. A file titled, in all its glorious finality, Period Termination Clause 14, Consequences of Revocation. I'd written it myself, tucked it into our internal compliance protocol last fiscal year, when the new leadership started tossing around words like redundancy and process bloat. I knew what that language meant. I knew it wouldn't be long before some MBA fresh out of a LinkedIn TED Talk decided we needed leaner operations. So I wrote the clause. Quietly. Legally airtight. Internally approved. Buried in the footnotes no one reads until they're desperate. And now? They were desperate. The clause spelled it all out in plain English. Termination of the credentialed agent without formal transfer and succession plan will result in automatic permit invalidation, triggering immediate license revocation across all active projects, contractual breach notices to government partners, insurance policy suspension under loss of oversight conditions, union protocol activation for unsafe site classification, compliance restoration contingent upon reinstatement or external credentialed contract under revised terms. And in bold, underlined just in case they were still squinting, these consequences are irreversible upon credential deactivation. Time-stamped, authenticated, uploaded into our internal knowledge base, and acknowledged by legal 5 months ago with a digital signature from one of the same lawyers now begging me to come to the table. So no, I didn't feel glee, or victory, or some fireworks finale moment. I just felt cold clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was math. You fire the person holding the only key, and the vault doesn't just lock. It buries itself in concrete and drops into the ocean. Still, I gave them a path. My attorney replied the next day. Polite, professional, written like gospel. Ms. Alden is available for one meeting to discuss terms of future involvement. Her participation is conditional on the following. Meeting to be held at a neutral location, chosen by Ms. Alden. All parties to be present, including CEO, General Counsel and 1 board member. Mr. Derek Yates to have no attendance or access privileges. Ms. Alden will not be reapplying for employment. This is a contractual discussion only. Meeting is to be audio recorded for documentation purposes. I heard they argued about it for 5 hours behind closed doors. But at 6:12 p.m. we got the confirmation. One line. Agreed. See you Monday. They thought they could erase me in a 3-minute speech. Now they'd sit across from me, pen in hand, praying for a signature. The boardroom looked exactly how I remembered it. Cold, quiet, and 40% more mahogany than necessary. Same brushed steel carafe on the table. Same wall of awards for innovation no one could define. But the energy, that had shifted. It didn't hum anymore. It cowered. The CEO sat dead center, flanked by the general counsel and Derek. If a man visibly deflating in a folding chair still counted as Derek. No suit today. No power tie. Just a gray button-down with sleeves wrinkled like he'd slept in it, which he might have. His eyes darted to the side when I entered, like I'd shown up in a ski mask and holding a matchbook. He didn't speak. Smartest thing he'd done all quarter. I took my seat opposite, set my folder down like it weighed 100 pounds, and let the silence work. My attorney, a woman whose tone could ice over lava, nodded to the CEO. We'll keep this brief. No preamble. No chit-chat. I reached into the folder, pulled out a single stapled packet, and slid it across the glossy wood. Consulting agreement, I said calmly. Exclusive. 12-month minimum. Weekly rate specified. Includes back pay equivalent to lost earnings from termination through re-engagement. The CEO didn't touch it right away. He glanced at legal. Legal was already scanning the first page. His jaw tensed when he hit the indemnity clause. You'll see, I continued. Full indemnification. Any liability incurred due to operational gaps after my removal? Not my problem. My attorney added. Clause 7 outlines restricted access. Ms. Alden will not report to, speak with, or collaborate under the authority of Mr. Yates. She didn't even glance at him. Any attempt to involve him voids the agreement. The CEO leaned back in his chair, exhaled like the weight of a decade sat on his chest, and rubbed his temples. For a moment I thought he might say something stupid, something about principle or pride. Instead he reached for a pen. He signed. Initialed. Dated. Didn't even ask to negotiate. Just a quiet scribble of surrender that echoed louder than any boardroom tantrum. Derek stood to leave, but the CEO gestured sharply. Sit. Like a dog told to heel. I didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. Just reached into the folder one more time and placed a USB drive on the table. Your recovery roadmap, I said. Timeline. Contact points. Submission dates. All conditional on continued adherence to the contract. Deviate once and it all dissolves. He nodded. That was it. No handshake. No thank you. No olive branch. Just business. I rose, gathered my folder, and turned to leave. But before I reached the door I paused, just long enough for them all to hear it. You didn't fire a problem. I turned, looked directly at the CEO, then let my gaze drift to Derek. You fired the firewall. The cranes began to move again the following Monday, slow, careful, like they remembered what it felt like to be still. Work sites powered up in staggered sequences, each one requiring my digital sign-off before a single bolt got torqued. No more rubber stamp approvals. No more blind delegation. Every inch of operation now passed through one quiet, surgically narrow bottleneck, me. The company called it a new era of externalized oversight. I called it penance. My new office wasn't on site. It wasn't even in the same zip code. Just a clean window-lined space in a third-floor suite I leased with my first retainer check. Minimalist. Quiet. The kind of place where you don't hear phones ringing or interns buzzing about synergy. I had a potted snake plant, 2 monitors, and a monthly espresso subscription. That was it. On the frosted glass outside my door, in simple block letters, Marie Alden, External Liaison Regcom Systems Advisory. They had offered me a full return, corner office, stock bonus, title upgrade. But I declined, because going back would have meant pretending. Pretending Derek was an anomaly. Pretending someone in that boardroom hadn't whispered redundant during my exit. Pretending they didn't all watch it happen and stay quiet. So no, I didn't go back. But I did agree to rent them their own damn lifeline. Derek, of course, was gone. officially stepping away to pursue new ventures, which I assume is HR speak for blew up $400 million in active contracts and got vaporized. His office now housed 2 junior project analysts and a very confused-looking intern. The CEO still couldn't look me in the eye. We crossed paths once in the lobby when he happened to be walking out as I walked in. He nodded. I didn't. Some people think silence is weak. In rooms like that, it's the only language that matters. Every Monday at exactly 9:01 a.m., I send an invoice. Flat rate, $70,000 per week. Covers compliance renewals, site certifications, and 2 hours of my attention. Anything beyond that? Billed hourly. They never contest it. They never negotiate. They just wire the funds and pray the system stays green. And me? I sit in my quiet office, log into the regulatory platform, check my boxes, sip my espresso, and close my laptop when the job's done. No chaos. No shouting. No fire drills. Just numbers. And numbers don't lie. To look tough, he fired me. To stay afloat, they now rent me.